Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Toby with mine and Ridge Armory here. I'm going to be doing a review for gear-report.com, gear-report.com, on the DSP Armory Titan in .308 caliber. We're going to be using a Crimson Trace CTL-5324 34mm first focal plane scope to mount on top of this thing. It's a beast and it's beautiful. I'm really looking forward to it. By the time you watch this, you can probably go to Gear Report and check out our content there in the review. But it occurred to me as I was getting ready to put everything together to be able to work through the review that it might benefit some of you out there to see how we semi-professionally mount a scope and maybe pick up some pointers and tips on how you can do it yourself. So if you're curious how we mounted the scope and you want to learn a little more, maybe pick up some techniques on your own, stick around. All right, so as odd as it may sound, to properly mount a scope on a platform that has a collapsible stock in the rear, you actually have to start all the way back at the back stock, or at the butt stock on the shoulder pad. Reason being is this. So the DSP Armory Titan is a great example of it. So the Luth AR stock that comes on this thing natively, it's an amazing stock. It gives you the ability to adjust up and down for your shoulder weld, where the height over bore or the height over your shoulder, so you can get that axis right. It gives you the ability to raise and lower your cheek rest, as well as the ability to go in and out on the stock. So naturally, that's going to change your field of vision, and it's going to change your scope standoff if you collapse or extend the butt stock. So for your body and your body only, you're going to have to make those adjustments. I'll show you on the DSP Armory Minuteman, which has a slightly simpler stock on it. This is the DSP Armory Minuteman AR-15 in 5.56, and this one I have a Strike Industries stock on, the Viper, I believe it is. So the point here that you're wanting to go for is you want to make sure that this is adjusted so for your usage, your daily usage and the way you run it, as well as to be able to give you that exact eye relief you're going to need on the scope. So in most cases, you're best to start from here and then work your way towards the scope, making sure you have a natural point of aim, a natural comfortable pickup of the scope and your field of view. So what I tend to do usually is I will adjust my stock to where it fits roughly in the crook of my arm. So I can hold comfortably, finger on the trigger if I need to, and can support it. This gives me the ability to work and to manipulate the firearm, as well as gives you that golden rule of proportions with regards to your body. You can quickly shoulder down to workspace and then back. It gives you just about the exact right position. So then from there is where I'm going to decide and work from with regards to where I'm going to mount my scope and get my exact eye relief. All right, at this step, we've got our butt stock adjusted to the length of pull, allowing for eye relief to begin with. Now the next step is to kind of figure out where our cantilever or scope mounts are going to sit. If your receiver has tapped holes already in it, your options are going to be limited, and that's pretty much where it's going to go. But in the case of a Picatinny rail or a Weaver rail set up on your rifle, you're going to have to determine where that mount is going to sit. So in this case, we're wanting it to be equidistant. Once you mount it and you're finished with your mounting, you're going to want equidistant on the front and the rear of your dials to be in between the two mounts, and you're going to want the optic to fall just at the right spot in the rear. In addition, you're also going to want the mount to be inside the Picatinny rail at a consistent spot, particularly if it's quick release where you're taking it on and off, and pushed forward. Once you have found the exact right spot for it, you want to push it as far forward in the channel of the Picatinny rail as possible, so that as the gun recoils rearward, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to stay in the same spot where you left it. So the best way to set a scope and to find your sweet spot, and again, right now what we're focusing on is not leveling the scope. We're not to that point yet of where we're going to mount the scope and lap it and things like that. Right now all we're trying to do is find the optimum position for this scope or for the mount. So you're going to want to mount the rifle at exactly the right spot. And I have my Crimson Trace CTL-5324 just kind of sitting here, just kind of sitting there on the mount and ready. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to close your eyes and then raise the gun naturally to the position where you would be shooting it from and open your eyes. You'll then be able to see whether you need to adjust it inwards or outwards to get that perfect sweet spot, and try it multiple times. So close your eyes, mount the rifle, open your eyes, and it should be exactly where it needs to be. If it's not, you're going to push the scope forward and backwards and the mount forward and backwards. And again, being mindful that you want equidistance between the rear and the front mount point and the dials. You want it to have plenty of room in between to get the proper eye relief and to get the proper functionality. Another great way to get the scope lined up exactly for your particular body's eye relief in relation to the stock is to lie down, focus on getting your exact position, focus on getting comfortable, focus on getting your body lined up just exactly like it should be, with the scope either loosely in the top and bottom ring or just lying in the bottom ring with the top ring off. Having another friend there with you to assist is actually especially helpful. But once you've gotten that position, you've gotten the scope lying there, you're basically laying exactly where you need to be, focus on closing your eyes, taking a breath and settling into the shot, and then open your eyes and seeing where that scope is at. And again, this is where a buddy would come in handy. You could then have them move it in or out. Just open your eyes, see where it's at, and then close them back and tell them move it in. Move it out. Open your eyes, focus in and focus back out. Move it in, move it out. That kind of thing. Okay, so basically what it boils down to is, I've showed you two methods, shouldering and positioning it similarly, moving it in and out until you get the exact eye relief, and then one lying on your belly we talked about. Which one should you do? Well, obviously the answer is going to be which one are you going to be spending more time doing. So AR-15s with a standard 1-4 or 1-6 power combat style scope, obviously you're going to be shouldering it more than you're going to be lying prone. A rifle like the DSP Armory Titan, probably going to be lying prone or on a table more often. So that would be when, instead of the shouldering, it would come in more handy to be able to do the lying position for positioning the scope for my particular body's eye relief. And again, with the DSP Armory Titan, I'm going to have a 45-degree red dot for anything 75, 50 yards and down anyways. That'll be the one that I will position for shouldering. While we're at it, that's also a good time for you to adjust if you have an adjustable cheek rest on your rifle and an adjustable butt pad. It's a good opportunity to go ahead and get that set up too, because you'll be able to determine as your eyes are closed and you're coming up, was I too high, was I too low, was it exactly right? This is a good opportunity for you to adjust that as well. All right, so this step may actually chafe your man card just a little bit, but bear with me, it'll all make sense whenever we get to the end and to the punchline. So first thing I'm going to do, it's going to chafe your man card because you're probably going to have to pull up the instructions and do a little bit of reading, unfortunately. And I know that's against man law 101, but it'll make perfect sense here in just a minute. So real quick, I'm going to take a measurement of the diameter of the screws that we're going to be using to mount the on the Wheeler Cantilever Scope mount. I'm going to take a second to measure the diameter real quick, and it'll make sense here in just a second. So this is one of the screws, one of the 6 screws that's going to be for the top ring that mounts to the bottom ring on the Wheeler Cantilever Scope mount. And you can see that it is about 1.34 or 0.134 rather inches. And that is on inches and not millimeters, okay? All right, so we're going to take that measurement, and then we're going to do a couple things. So in the event that you don't have a instructions or manufacturer's recommendations directly on the scope, your particular scope mount, which we do have for this Wheeler, and I'll show you that here in just a second. But if you don't have that information available to you, what you're going to have to do is reference back to your Wheeler Ultra Scope Mount kit, and it comes with a chart, and as you can see, it references the diameter of the different screws for the scope mount that you've got. And in this particular case, we fell at about 0.134, which falls in this first category of the C32, 632, 640, 648, which will be 18 to 20 inch-pounds of torque that we're going to have to put on those screws. All right. So again, having to read the manual, sorry about that. If by some wild chance you don't have this manual and you've lost it, or you're just worried about it, most rings and manufacturers are going to range between 17 inch-pounds and about 25 inch-pounds. You're relatively safe to get in that range. Now, as you can notice here from the instructions, though, there are those times in those diameters of screws it's going to get up to 40 or 45. A good example of that, if we pull up the Wheeler instructions here that came with the Wheeler Cantilever mount, in this particular case, is that, let's see if we can get this to focus in for you, is that in fact the mount bolt for the bottom side that attaches to the Picatinny rail is in fact going to be 40 to 50 inch-pounds. But the screws on the top ring mounting to the bottom ring is only going to be 15 to 18 inch-pounds, which again falls directly into the 18 to 20 inch-pounds that we saw referenced from the Wheeler scope mount kit and to use for torque when we're putting on the top ring. So it's basically matching up. You know, what one's saying is matching up with the other, and that's fine. That's actually what you want to see. But again, worst case scenario, if you don't have any kind of documentation, you want to target between for the rings themselves, you want to target between 17 and 25 inch-pounds. It's going to keep you in the safe range, basically. Anything tighter, you may end up stripping out or damaging the scope rings, or potentially beginning to crush, God forbid, the actual diameter or the tube on the optic itself. Now, real quick side note, you'll notice that it has, in this particular case, again, manufacturer suggested torque pattern. It has a torque pattern, so it expects you to screw the center, then number 2, then number 3, then number 4, then number 5, then number 6, alternating sides, starting with the top, then bottom, then alternating corners, top to bottom. Okay. Now I'll show you what that means, and we'll take the next step. And unfortunately, this next step is going to be really tedious, and there's no easy way around it. All right. Now for the next step, unfortunately, there is no easy, quick, done and dirty way to do this. If you just bolt the top ring to the bottom ring and squeeze it all down good and tight, even the manufacturer specs, you're going to be cheating yourself. And if you've got a good, super good quality optic like we do here with this Crimson Trace CTL-5324, you don't want to cheat yourself and just slap the top rings on there, torque them down to the foot-pound inches and walk away. We want to get the maximum amount of contact on the front and the rear rings around the diameter of the scope itself to get the maximum grip. You don't want it digging in at an angle on one side or the other. You don't want it only gripping front and back and not in the center. We want maximum grip and maximum amount of level as we possibly can. Now, obviously, the longer distances you're going to be shooting, the more that makes a difference. But regardless, I mean, with a super good quality piece of glass like this, like I said, this is the Crimson Trace CTL-5324, 3 to 24 by 56 illuminated scope. You don't want to just slap this thing on there. You want to do this right. And there is no quick, easy way to do this. You're going to have to just do your work the way you need to do, or the way that you have to. You're going to have to do it the slow, tedious way. So we've got our Wheeler Engineering Ultrascope mounting kit over here that we're going to be reviewing at Gear Report. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the screw and I'm going to find the particular head that I need to use. In this case, it's just a star bit 472. And then I'm going to get my torque wrench, or my torque screwdriver, my fat wrench is what it's called. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that it's down to 0. Now, always store your torque wrench at 0. Okay, never store it at the last foot-pound setting that you had, because eventually that's going to cause the springs and the tension to wear out and it won't work for you. What you do is pull it out, turn it counterclockwise till it gets down below 0, or till it stops spinning and you've released all the torque and all the pressure to it. Now in this particular case, for what we're getting ready to do, for the initial setup, or for this initial step, we're going to go ahead and push it up to the Again, pull it out, and this time instead of counterclockwise, we're going to turn it clockwise. And we're going to take that all the way up to about the recommended 18 or 20 foot-pound or inch-pounds mark. Okay, that's about 20 right there. You can see that again, I turned it clockwise, I pulled it out, turned it clockwise, and I got it to the 20 mark. Okay, so we're on 20 inch-pounds at the moment. All right, now what we're going to do, make sure I can get this thing to focus, is we're going to take our lapping levels, and we're going to set those in the front and the rear. And we're again, you know, we're going to try to make it equidistant to one another. Right, we're going to try to make them equidistant to the front and to the rear of the rifle itself and of the scope mounts. You see, I'll try to get equal distance here, and you want to try to get them about as close as you can without actually touching towards one another. And the goal on this is we're going to see, once we tighten down the upper ring to it, we're going to see exactly how level this thing is and whether it needs to be lapped or not. So another quick side note is I saved the position of the top rings when I took them off. So this was the back ring and this one was the front ring, and I laid them down on my Tipton's gun vise in position so that when I come back to do this step, I'd put them back in the exact same spot. Now with the case of this Wheeler Cantilever mount, I don't think it actually matters. I think these are manufactured separately and then they come together. But in your more expensive and precision mounts, sometimes that matters. You know, making sure that the scope ring top and bottom lines up to the one that's on the front because of differences in machining. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just real quick going to take my bit, my star bit, and I'm going to just start these finger tight. And again, we're going to follow the manufacturer's recommendations. We're going to go top center, 1, and I'm just till it starts to bite. Then top center, bottom, 2. Okay, and then let me check and see which way they said to go for the next one. Pretty sure it was this one, but let's double check. Nope, other side. All right, then 3. Okay, and again, I'm just letting it just barely touch and barely start to grab. There's no pressure whatsoever. Then opposite corner, 4. Just letting it touch and grab. Then 5. Okay. And finally the opposite corner. All right, and again, just barely letting that grab. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the front, top ring. All right, now that we've got that going, we've got that started rather, I should say, we're going to insert it into our fat wrench and we're going to take the next step. All right, the next step is we're going to use that exact same pattern that we just used, and we're going to rotate accordingly, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 5, 6, etc., and we're going to slowly but surely work our way down until all of them match at the 20 foot-pound or 20 inch-pounds. Okay, so starting with 1, just going to give it a little bit of a turn, nothing major. Then we're going to go to the opposite side, give it a little turn, nothing major. Then we're going to go to position 3. Well, we're going to go to position 3. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I wouldn't be super scientific about that, whether it's 3, 4, then 5 later, or whether it's 3, 5. It doesn't matter. What the key is to alternate sides. So you start in this case it's at 6. You're starting with the center point to pull that down in again, and you're looking for equidistance in the gap. You're wanting equidistance on both sides, and you're wanting equidispersion of the pressure and the torque that you're putting on it. So, but main thing is I went with 3 over here, so then I'm going to go opposite corner. Nothing. I'm not going to let it click. Then we'll go up here. Okay, then we're going to go down here, and I'm just going to keep repeating. Oh, we went all the way with that one. Truthfully, they're probably all pretty close, and we're going to go all the way with this one, okay, and all the way with number 2, all the way with number 3, all the way with number 4, and there's no need to keep letting it click. Once is enough. And avoid the temptation avoid the temptation to keep clicking it, and avoid the temptation to go a little bit tighter after you've got that in there. Once it's in, it's in. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing on this other one. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to stop the camera here, and we're going to get the camera down here to where you can see exactly how this is lined up and what we've got going on here. Okay, so as you can see on this particular lapping setup for the Wheeler Cantilever Scope mounts, it's pretty close. Now that is definitely a testimony to the quality of manufacturing that Wheeler's put into this cantilever mount. That is pretty darn close. Now you can see maybe just a little bit where it's off over here, this direction just a little bit, that the two are not lining up perfectly. Not perfectly perfect. So we are going to lap this one just a little bit, but I have to give all the credit in the world to Wheeler on this one. That is pretty spot on and pretty close, considering that this is right straight out of the box. And another thing to note too is you have to make sure, like I was talking about, that you have equidistance of daylight on this side as well as the opposite side, to make sure that and that's the goal you're looking for, is to make sure that these top rings are put on in such a way to where you're not canted one side or the other, and you're not digging in one side or the other, so that you can get a true measurement and a true grip on your scope in the end. So quick side note, when you go to remove them, when you go to remove the screws that you've put in, I wouldn't necessarily use the torque wrench, the fat wrench. I would actually probably just use a regular screwdriver with the same bit. And the reason is because you don't want to sit there and overtax or overwork or over torque your torque wrench. You want to use it for what it's intended for only, and that's usually to go in, not necessarily to go out. So no reason to put any unnecessary strain to your good quality tools when you can just get a beater screwdriver like this Lowe's Cobalt multi-head driver that I had laying around. All right, so this next step is another one of those that there is literally no quick or easy way, unfortunately. We're going to take our lapping bar, our Wheeler's lapping bar, from the 34mm kit. And by the way, the couple things to note that I haven't called out, the Wheeler Cantilever Scope mount comes in this is the 34mm version. It comes in a 30mm and a 1-inch version. The reason I'm mentioning it is not as an advertisement for Wheeler, but is to let you know that you need to make sure that both your lapping kit and your scope mounts are the correct diameter for your particular optic. So in this case, we are not going to torque it down. Instead, all we're going to do is just get it, because we want the lapping bar to be able to move freely, so that we can shore up where we had that slightly off level for the two pointers a little while ago. Wanting to get that just kind of snug enough to where the lap bar can still move, but it's not going to pop out in any way. And then we're going to use basically a 220 grit, effectively rubbing compound. That's basically what it's called. It's called a lapping compound, but it's very similar in nature or in feel to a toothpaste or a rubbing compound. You'll notice that there's a single hole here and that there's another hole here. That would be according to the position of your particular rifle. If your rifle is, it's too far over bore and you can't get the center, there's not enough room for you to work backwards and forwards, side to side and backwards and forwards, then you can use the rear hole as well. So I got that too tight. See, it doesn't move at all. So we're going to back all those off a little bit. And again, this time we're not going to torque it down, because we want it to move and breathe a little bit. We still want it to be relatively equidistant. That's too loose. Let's just barely get it to touch on all 6, just barely. No tightness at all, just barely touch. Okay, we want to move freely, or semi-freely, but yet make contact on all points. That's the goal. So I'm going to stop the video on this one. We're going to snug this one up, and then we'll come back and put a little rubbing compound on and get it going. Okay, so we've got this snug down finger tight on both sides. And you can see that it actually still moves a little bit freely. We're going to go ahead and screw the lapping bar handle into the center, because I have room to move backwards and forwards. We're going to screw that all the way in. We're going to get our 220 grit lapping compound. And again, this is the Wheeler's lapping compound. And we're going to put a little bit on both sides. And you can see it's kind of a gritty, sandpapery kind of stuff. I mean, it's just 220 grit, just like you would think from a sandpaper, right? So we're going to put a little bit on this side. And a little bit on this side. All four corners, basically, is what we're going to be doing. I think I got a little too much on that front there. That's all right, because we're going to wipe it off here in a minute anyways. You're going to work it backwards and forwards, and we're going to wipe off the excess. A little bit here. And then we're basically just going to work it front to back, side to side, in and out, and just kind of move it around. What we're doing is, the goal is to try to shave off just a little bit at a time of the metal and paint to get it to where everything for the pointers on the lapping bars mount up perfectly. So you can hear that grinding. I got it just a little too tight. Maybe we're just going to get it to work. And as you can see, I'm just going back to front and side to side. I can feel it smoothing up. It catches a little more back there. You are actually taking off microscopic layers of metal and of paint on when you do this. So bear that in mind. If you've got a scope ring that might rust, or if you're concerned that it would rust, although most modern materials won't, particularly if they're aluminum or that kind of material. If you're concerned though, you may want to consider either touching it up after this step, touching it up with some bluing material or paint, very thinned down paint that will protect the metal, but won't then add back that material that you just shaved off. All right. The evil mailman just pulled up, and so my dog's going crazy. All right. We're going to give that a check and see how that lines up now. Again, I'm going to stop the camera, and I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to re-screw down using the 20 inch-pounds of pressure and properly mount our lapping pointers to see where we're at now. So hang on. All right, so real quick tip. Before I get to the pointers and get those locked down, I wanted to point out one thing real quick. So what I am going to do in between the steps, let me lay this down here, is I'm going to lay my lapping bar to the side with leaving the 220 grit lapping compound on it. I'm not going to clean the lapping bar itself, but I am going to clean the insides of both the top ring and the lower rings, just in case. I'm going to clean those off, get the lapping compound out, because of the fact that that will not give me a true reading necessarily of actual contact for the two lapping pointers. So I am going to clean that and the lower rings, the upper and the lower rings, before I torque those down or torque down the pointers. As you can see, now that's not absolute teetotal, Egyptian pyramid perfection, but that is pretty darn close. That is absolutely good enough for government work for me. So now I am confident enough that we have lapped off enough material and that is pointed and level enough to where I am confident in going ahead and mounting this piece of glass. Hopefully you can get that, and I may be able to zoom in on it when I'm in editing here, but you can see during the process where the high points that got rubbed off were. So you can see that the silver here, 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 and here, and you can see silver here, 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 and here, more here, and then here and here than anywhere else. So that's what was being rubbed off, and it was mainly only on the lower rings. You can see the upper rings have very minimal amounts of lapping going on. This one had quite a bit on the inside, or the back side rather, facing back towards the stock. But that's pretty good testimony to the quality of the Wheeler scope mount right out of the gates. It didn't shave off much, and it was literally just taking off the high points. You can kind of see that there by the silver patterns. Okay, So next step is I'm going to make sure that I have a perfectly level surface. We've got a perfectly connected surface on the inside of the rings. Now we're going to make sure that we have a perfectly level surface to work with in mounting the optic. Now, the Wheeler scope mount kit comes with two types of levels. It comes with a standard flat level and a barrel level. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the standard flat level to make sure that the mounting platform itself is level, and then we're going to put this barrel level on for reference and leave that on through the rest of the process, or at least until we go to solder it in, until we get the scope mounted. Now, a couple side notes, a couple things I want to talk about here. I've got this thing clamped down. I've got it relatively near to center bubble on the base itself, okay? On the base itself. Now, if you had two flat rings, you could always lay it on top of the two flat rings as opposed to this canted angle that I have here. What I don't suggest, though, is that you use on an AR platform rifle, I don't suggest that you use, or on a standard rifle, I don't suggest you use the barrel or the forend. And the reason is because, as you can see from these 4 screws, and as anyone who's ever built an AR platform rifle knows, you do have to turn this forend a lot of times for a free float barrel or free float forend. And you may be off, you know, 1/8 of an inch one way or the other, and so your bubble's not going to be on. That then is going to translate to your glass. Now you can, you know, level on the receiver itself sometimes. In this case, we're coming up about a quarter of a bubble off there, and then the base itself is coming up dead center bubble at almost every position on the base. Now you will notice again there's a slight variance. So, and this is in the manufacturing. So there's a slight variance of about 1/8 of a bubble there and a dead center bubble there. Then back here on the receiver, there's about a quarter of a bubble. So you're going to have a bunch of different spots there, a bunch of different ways that you can measure. So I'm going to opt to go with directly under the point where the center axis of that scope is going to be. So I'm going to put it right about there, because remember when we were measuring it originally, we made sure that it was centered, that the dials, the windage and elevation dials, were dead centered between the two rings. So that's where I'm going to center it at. Now that I've got that on bubble where I want it, I'm going to take the barrel level, and as you can see, it's pretty much just this side is static, this side swings in and out. I've adjusted it to the diameter of the barrel real quick. I'm going to slap that in there, or pop that on there, and I'm going to tighten it down. Now there is an adjustment up here, a top adjustment, to where you can adjust the up or down. You can adjust the bubble itself, or the arm up top that has the bubble in it. But instead I'm going to turn the whole thing. So I'm going to turn the whole barrel level and make sure that it is clamped down about dead center bubble, roughly dead center bubble for me. And I'm going to leave that on through the rest of the scope mounting process, not the side end process, but the scope mounting process, so that I can always quick reference back to, sorry, I didn't show that, did I? So I mounted that out here and I got it about center bubble. I apologize for that. I skipped off of that, didn't I? I skipped over that. I'll leave that on there for the rest of the mounting process, so that you can, so that I can come back, quick reference back to it. Now again, I want to double check and make sure that I'm still level here and I'm level here before I remove that flat level. And this one out here did move just a little bit. So I'm going to move it, because I moved the whole rifle in the clamp. This Tipton's gun vise, Tipton's Best gun vise, is a great vise, but it's not rock solid. It's padded, and it does have a little plastic movement in it. So now I can safely remove this, and we can go on to the next step of actually the flat level, and we can actually go on to the next step of mounting the glass on here, going through the process of tightening down the top rings, doing the opposite corner down to the 20 foot-pounds, making sure that it's level when we mount it, that it's level. And then what we'll do is we will pick it up and make sure we'll shoulder the rifle again to still make sure that the eye relief and that the shoulder pull, the length of pull, everything is exactly where we need it to be. And then we'll unscrew it again, and we'll red Loctite it down or blue Loctite it down after that. So I'm going to stop the camera. We're going to screw this down, make sure everything gets level the way we want it, and then we'll start the camera back up and take the next steps. All right, so we've got our Crimson Trace CTL-5324 mounted to our Wheeler Cantilever 34mm offset scope rings on our DSP Armory Titan AR-10. I've screwed down the two top rings using the 20 inch-pounds torque required. pulled the rifle up, re-shouldered it a couple times to make sure that it's still got correct eye relief and correct length of pull on the stock. I've remounted it back and re-leveled everything to make sure. So now there's only one more step left to do, and this is in my opinion, required. A lot of people argue and say otherwise, but I think that this is something you need to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove one ring at a time, only one ring. So I'll start with the rear ring, and we're going to relieve that pressure and take that ring off. I'm then going to use the included Wheeler thread locker, and put a little bit of thread lock back on the screws and run them back in one last time using the 20 inch-pounds with the fat wrench to get it to mount. So real quick, just want to show you something real quick. I won't force you to watch me do all that on camera, but I do want to show you this real quick. So I'm going to take all the screws out all the way, and for those of you who are wondering, you know, the bottle's red. Oh my goodness, is that red Loctite? You know, a lot of people will panic if you've got red Loctite versus blue Loctite. Wheeler says on the bottle very clearly this is AN222 and it is removable strength. So what I'm going to do is, it's purple. It's not blue, it's not red. I'm going to trust Wheeler that they know what they're doing, and I'm going to pull the lid. See if I can get this thing to pull without making too much of a mess. And then I will just take inside the lid here, how there's a little hole, I'll dip each screw a little bit and get a little bit of the Loctite on it, and I'll run them back in again down to that 20 inch-pounds. We're using the fat wrench, and then we'll be to the next step, which will be to zero it. That occurred to me as I was putting this back together. One is three quick tips actually. Number one is the included thread locker. The Wheeler included thread locker has this little lid that you can put things in. You can take the tip, put your screw on there. If you have a magnetic tip or otherwise, which I actually dipped that one too deep, but you get the general idea. You can just dip it and then insert it. That's tip number one, real quick. Tip number two is clean up after yourself. Don't be a noob. Don't be a jerk and leave some of that thread lock all over the rings. Clean up after yourself. And finally, make sure you get all that extra thread lock off. And finally, and most importantly, is don't forget, after this step, you need to relieve the pressure on your fat wrench. Take it back down to below zero by pulling it out and turning it counterclockwise until it bottoms out, or until it gets down below zero, so that when you put this all back into the kit, it doesn't, you know, sit there and under tension and end up messing itself up. All right, the next step is we're going to try to get the Optic kind of basically bore-sighted or dialed in to where it would be roughly on paper at 100 yards out, so that we can then dial it into a precision point. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do a bore sighting on a rifle, and I won't go into details on a whole lot of them. I'll just name two here today. One of them is actual eye bore sighting, and one of them is going to be laser bore sighting. So eye bore sighting, the concept is if you have a bolt rifle, you're going to take the bolt out, you're going to mount it into a sturdy platform of some kind, and you're going to literally look down the barrel of the rifle. Or in our case of the DSP Armory AR-10, I would take my upper off, remove the bolt carrier group and charging handle, mount it solid, and again, look down that barrel, getting it on a target out at roughly 25 yards out. Then I would take my measurement based on the height of scope, the axis of the scope over the axis of the barrel, divide that in half, and that's where I would put that barrel and then dial in the scope above it. So for example, we'll talk about that a little more in depth as we talk about laser bore sighting. The method we're going to use, because the Wheeler kit comes with a laser bore sighter, is we're going to put a laser bore sighter on the surface of the barrel. That beam is going to come out 25 yards, and it's going to, Wheeler came with a set of instructions and a reflective sticker to help better reflect that green dot and make it more visible. But it gives you the general gist of the idea if you look at these instructions. And I'll try to splice in a picture of that. But you're going to measure, again, the distance from the barrel, center of the barrel, to the center of the optic. You're going to divide that in half, and then you're going to want, that's going to be your measurement. So say, for example, if it was 2 inches from center of the barrel to center of the scope, then you're going to put the green dot 1 inch below center, but sight your scope in on center. Same idea and same concept for bore sighting it with your eyes down the barrel. In my particular case of the DSP Armory Titan, it's about 3 inches over the barrel. So for me, it's going to be, I'm going to put the green dot at about 1.5 inches down, but I'm going to sight the scope on dead center. And that's going to get me roughly on paper. Now, a couple of pro tips. When you go to set up your target, if you've got a good quality target like this, like the Wheeler target that I have here, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and use a level and level your lines horizontally and vertically. Level these lines out when you're mounting it 25 yards out to kind of give you yet another verification and assurance that you got your scope level, because your crosshairs will match the level of your target. Just a nice little point of something extra you can do as you're setting all this up. Now, a couple side points real quick about laser bore sighters. This Wheeler Ultimate kit comes with a surface mounted barrel. So this one, bore sighting optic laser. So this one magnets onto the end of the barrel. The reason I'm mentioning that is for 2 reasons. Number one is because it doesn't go inside the barrel to give you that exact precision direct point, but that also keeps you from potentially damaging the lands and grooves inside of your barrel. Secondly, a lot of people are concerned that if you get it kind of slightly off-centered, that's going to throw your results off. I mean, it may throw it off 1 inch to 1/4 of an inch or less, usually less, 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch out at 25 yards, but that's okay, because again, we're not trying to get it precision out with a laser bore sighter at 100 yards. We're just trying to get it on paper. Then it's up to you to dial it in from there. All right, now that we've got a bunch of the tedious ground laying work done for getting that scope zeroed in, getting it mounted and getting it zeroed in, let's go and do some of the fun stuff. Let's take it out to the range and start putting some holes in paper out at about 100 yards and dial that thing down to exactly where we want it. Let's go have some fun.